everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Super Region 1 Roundup here with Gary Smith. I'm your host this week, Colin Kirkwood. We switch back and forth, and Gary Smith, known for his extensive knowledge of everything PSAC, and I'm still somewhat new here to the world of the Mountain East Conference, but I'd like to think we're doing a pretty good job.
Well, I mean, already we're off to a better start since I called it the Atlantic region, which is basketball and other sports within the first 32 seconds last week. So already you're distributing the ball better than I did last week. But I tell you what, we're heading into October, and there's a lot of good football that has been played and a lot of storylines to look at coming up in this last 6 or 7 weeks of the season.
A lot of great games last week as well. A lot of outcomes that a lot of people really didn't expect across multiple leagues here. And I guess we'll go ahead and start right with your neck of the woods in the PSAC. A couple games that a lot of people really weren't expecting, thinking a lot about Kutztown.
Well, I tell you what, that Kutztown at Shepherd game, you never want to bet against Shepherd at home in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. They have probably one of the best home field advantages in Super Region 1, if not the country, just the way the stadium sits there.
Right.
And Kutztown coming off of a loss at IUP, I think a lot of people discounted them. And I tell you what, they went in and by all accounts played a solid game. I don't know if Shepherd played the game that they are capable of playing, but, you can't take any plays off. And Kutztown came out with a 37-29 win, and that's a game that's going to have implications on the PSAC championship picture and also possibly playoff implications later.
You think about it, those multiple teams, you throw IUP in the mix as well. I mean, they had all beaten up on each other here in the first 3 weeks of the season, and it's just been impressive to see who's really bringing what to the table.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about the way the PSAC is set up. 2 divisions, and, each division is probably 3 or 4 teams heavy. So going into every season, there's going to be probably half the league is going to be in line for a possible PSAC championship game appearance. But more importantly, fighting for one of those 7 NCAA playoff spots when it comes time. So it's a slog each and every week. And as we look at the scoreboards, first weekend of divisional play in the PSAC, we already talked about Kutztown at Shepherd, Cal U surviving at Edinburgh 20-12. And then you go down the list, Shippensburg has, by all metrics, has been impressive this year offensively. They always have been, but it seems like
very surprising. And
it seems like they're a little bit more defensively responsible this year. In years past, you would see Shippensburg games being like 54-47, but it seems like the offense, led by Messina, who's been there probably 5 or 6 years, it seems like, with the COVID year also in there. So you have a leader there that's been around the wars, and if Shippensburg can just have enough defense, they could really surge to the top of the PSAC East. Really, no other big close games this week that in the PSAC or this past weekend that are really shocking other than that Kutztown. That was by far and away the highlight of the weekend, right. Kutztown Shepherd game. But moving back, I'll tend to serve the shot back to you, Colin, the MEC. Yeah, you know what? Each and every week, man, there's something going on.
Yeah, I'm going to say this may be one of the biggest, if not the biggest week here. The top 4 teams in the preseason poll are all going at it this week. But we'll talk about that a little bit later here. But wrapping up just some of the scores from this past Saturday, there were a couple of surprises. Just as I said in last week's show, West Virginia State gave Notre Dame a run for their money. It was a low-scoring game at the half. And, of course, just as I had gone along with the narrative that West Virginia State struggles to finish games, they did struggle, in fact, to try and close that one. Ended up losing that game 38-14. It was a single-digit game at one point at the half. Very low scoring. Surprised a lot of people, but across the board, another one that's very, very important in terms of the standings of the conference. Fairmont State 30, UNC Pembroke 27.
Yeah, and I tell you what,
it was a thriller.
We saw Fairmont State the first week Cal U played down there, and Fairmont State, first game of the year. I don't think they had anybody coming back with a lot of experience on the offensive side, but you could tell defensively they were going to be good enough to keep in games, and they could be one of those teams that, once that offense starts getting some experience and rolling, they may have enough defense and they can get enough points. They can surprise one of these top teams and make things different. Again, conference is one thing, but, if you lose too many games, there's only seven spots in the playoffs. And that seems like a lot until you realize there's about 60 some, or maybe not 60, but there's close to 50, 55 teams in Super Region 1.
And, of course, one of the other really notable ones here, Charleston found their way to bounce back immediately, playing against Alderson Broaddus. AB of the Battlers tried to battle, but Charleston ultimately put up 69 points on them in that matchup, a 69-7 final score.
Yeah, and Charleston, you saw them a week ago. You knew they were going to bounce back. And, Alston brought us early in the season. It seemed like they might have righted the ship, but Charleston got back right in a big way at Philippi, West Virginia.
That's really most of the notable scores from last week. We'll talk about this week's schedule here later on. But, right back to you here. Let's talk a little bit about the GMAC and what went on over there.
Well, the GMAC this past weekend, a lot of non-conference matchups. Every game, I believe, was a non-conference matchup. And there was some really unique scores there. Kentucky Wesleyan, a team you saw, getting the home win against William Jewell College, 41-21. But if you look down, possibly this, we talked about the Kutztown Shepherd game being a big game, but possibly nationally, the Ohio Dominican Indianapolis game, it's not a regional game, but a very important game when you talk national rankings and also possible, playoff considerations. Ohio Dominican going to Indianapolis, finishing off the Greyhounds 19-16 in overtime in a place that's not easy to play. And, we've said it before, when it comes time for the regional committees to debate, that's a good out-of-region game to have on your resume. And looking
any other notable things that you really saw throughout the rest of that conference from last week?
So really, a lot of high scores. Ashland holding serve against Quincy, 63-23. I thought that game would be a lot closer, but Ashland apparently watched this and said, no, we're going to put up 60-some points. And then if you look down, Hillsdale holding serve at home against Missouri S&T, 38-20 or 38-31. So those are the games. But Findlay losing to Lindenwood. Findlay's been a team recently in the last couple of years that has been on top. So Lindenwood going to Findlay, Ohio, and winning by 12 points, I think is a little bit of a surprise because Findlay, like I just said, they've been a good team the last couple of years, and also they've been a good team at home. So it's the last weekend, I believe they have a non-conference play going into this week. They'll be in conference play. So always something to build on. And I had a chance to talk to Coach Dunn on his weekly coaches show, and conference play and divisional play is an entirely different ballgame because teams know each other. So we'll see what happens this coming week. But back to you on the volley, going to the Northeast 10 and a place that we know a little bit about. You've been there a couple times. I've been there once. But always, there's always some surprises each and every week in the Northeast 10.
Yeah, it's been a while for them since they really had a good standout candidate on the national stage, and I think you may see one this year the farther the season goes. Bentley is really putting together a fantastic season so far. They shocked Westchester in their opener. A lot of people didn't pick that. A lot of people didn't expect that, but the two essentially top dogs met this week for that conference, Bentley and American International, and Bentley 35, American International 27. I saw that got a lot of international attention, or national attention, I guess you could say, but still, a lot of people were watching that one to see if perhaps maybe this could be a year that the NE10 will send another playoff team. Last one was Assumption way back in, I want to say 2019, 2018. They got a win. Actually, no, they lost to Stone Hill by 27-26. But still, it's been a little bit for the NE10, and Bentley starting to come on strong here.
And one of the things with the NE10, again, they're probably a conference that's top heavy by 2 or 3 teams. But, if they are able to get 1 or 2 teams in the national playoffs, that could
be an issue for people around here.
Yeah, that's a big home field advantage if they can get a home game because they're so far removed from pretty much anybody in the region other than like a PSAC East team. So if they can get in, firsthand what that drive does to a team. And, it's going to be interesting coming on.
We've done it twice.
Yeah. And, going into their next round of conference play, or this weekend, the next round of conference play is, the things are going to get clear. But I agree with you. I think that Bentley team is proven early in the season. They went into the PSAC and won a very big game. And I think they're a team to put a star on next to looking through this October portion of the schedule.
Bentley cracking the top 25 this week, number 24. They weren't ranked until then, but good for them. And, moving into this week's PSAC schedule, you've got a special team that you haven't seen in the top 25 in a while that made it in there, and you're pretty familiar with them at 25. Tied, I should say.
I'm familiar with both teams that are tied at 25. The Caillou Vulcans cracking the top 25, starting the season undefeated. And I tell you what, getting to see this team each and every week coming into the season, I think with every team, there are a lot of question marks just not playing in basically 2 years. But I think on the defensive side, I don't think a lot of people knew how the holes were going to be filled from graduations. I tell you what, they filled everything. Noah Dillo and company are just playing great ball defensively. Offensively, they're still trying to get an identity running the ball, but Noah Mitchell and the wide receivers, Noah's finding about 6 to 8 receivers each week. So an exciting team to watch, and they're going to be at home this week, the Vulcans at home against Mercyhurst for homecoming. And then as you look around the schedule, probably the other notable game in the PSAC this week would have to be in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Shippensburg traveling to Shepherd. That even before Shepherd joined the PSAC, that was a rivalry. Shippensburg and Shepherd separated by maybe 45 minutes of Interstate 81, and that is going to be a fun game to keep track of. And I tell you what, I would not want to be Shippensburg. Shepherd does not want to lose. Shepherd doesn't lose at home very often, and I know they don't want to lose 2 in a row at home.
I couldn't imagine them losing 2 in a row. They hung around in the top 25 this week, but they sunk like a rock. Went from 10th to 21st.
And Colin, I know I'm looking at the MEC schedule, and I can't wait to see which games you pick because there's a couple I would star right here off of your schedule.
Number one, obviously, we're going to be keeping a very, very, very close eye on Notre Dame College in Charleston with the Golden Eagles hosting the Falcons of NDC. That is a very important one. This is the top 2 teams in the MEC preseason poll. Notre Dame number 1, Charleston number 2. And these two can beat up on each other. The path for Frostburg State gets a lot easier, to say the least here. All they would have to do is just take care of business next week against the Falcons on the road. But still, Frostburg State's got their hands full this week. UNC Pembroke taking the trip up here to Bobcat Stadium from North Carolina. 2 very interesting ones.
Well, I tell you what, yeah, we talked, obviously you talked to me a lot about Frostburg State, and it seems that, they're a team that's built for this slog, responsible on offense and hard-nosed defense. And like you said last week, a kind of a throwback team.
Yeah, very run-centric here. They really try to lay it on there in terms first and second. Even sometimes you'll see some third down rush attempts, and they just got numerous great backs that can get the job done. It's really fun to watch. It's a kind of brand of football you don't really see as often anymore. You see the ball really thrown around a lot, but just seeing some vintage football has been a lot of fun, plus the stellar defense here. But 2 important ones to watch here for conference standings. And you think about this, Charleston able to steal a win against Notre Dame. That makes next week very, very important because Frostburg State already has a win over Charleston. If they could get a win over NDC as well, that puts you in the driver's seat to win the conference. But keep in mind, they can't qualify for playoffs this year as they are in the last year of their probation from jumping up from D3 to D2, which just makes it even more impressive.
Yeah, especially, like you said, doing what they've done in such a short term, transitioning from D3 to D2. And they can, be great to get that conference title. And also maybe throw a monkey wrench in some teams that could qualify for the NCAA playoffs. But moving on to the Great Midwest, the first week in a conference play for them, they have a Thursday night game, Ashland at Walsh, and that is at the Hall of Fame Stadium in Canton. But the game I think I would circle would be the 4 o'clock game in Tiffin. Hillsdale traveling to Tiffin. Both teams have historically been solid. Both teams not struggling a little bit, but I don't think making the most of their 2021 season. So that's the game I would circle, especially since Tiffin is a tough place to play. And
they're going to look for a bounce back after last week, considering they lost to Truman State.
Oh, they're definitely going to be looking to get the bounce back. Hillsdale, that's a long drive from Hillsdale, Michigan. I've done it from Cal PA once. So there's no real easy way to get from Hillsdale to anywhere. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond going to Ohio and then going to the upper right portion of the country. Colin, what do you have for the Northeast 10?
A rare Friday game. That'll be a good one to watch here. American International and Southern Connecticut State. Should be a fun one if you have nothing going on. Southern Connecticut sitting towards the middle of the NE10. Of course, Bentley on top, just to really get a chance to watch this team, because I feel like a lot of people are really going to be surprised if they get mentioned towards the end of the year for a playoff spot, and they'll immediately try to discredit the league. But still, take a look at them. They're a pretty interesting team to watch. I saw some highlights from last week and heard other people talk about them really starting to come on as a program. So take a look at that one. Could be a fun one.
And what else would be fun is looking at the national rankings, because, you and I both talk a lot about this, that, for whatever reason, the Super Region 1 doesn't get the respect nationally, but there's good football that's being played, and some teams are cracking the top 25 in the AFCA poll.
Yeah, down tie for 25th. Cal, PA, Indiana sitting there. Two good teams as well. Shepherd still hanging around as well. Of course, Notre Dame sitting towards the top half of this poll, sitting at number 6. I mean, they're just waiting in the wings for somebody to lose in that top 5, which is very possible the farther into the season things go. And they're looking to try to crack into that. But Slippery Rock still hanging around at the 7th as well. I mean, there's plenty of good teams to choose from here. I know sometimes people don't want to credit that and acknowledge that, but you can't even really discredit it at all. You got to look at it. You got to think about it. And still, there's a couple teams waiting in the wings as well, receiving votes. Kutztown's down there again, sitting with 55. Frostburg State with 39. Plenty to choose from.
Yeah, it's such a fun reason to watch because, you know, and especially now that we're into conference, all the conferences are into conference play or divisional play in the case of the PSAC. But, you know, these are teams that are geographically closer. They know each other. You know, there's like coaches are recruiting one another. These players, by and large, may have seen each other in high school. So each and every week, especially in this region and these conferences, is going to be just a battle, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And it's hard to believe, Colin, we're moving into October.
It's moving so quickly here. I mean, this is really the part of the year where you start to see some incredible games, and once November hits, it's going to get even better.
Well, I don't think we have anything else to say, but since this is your game, I'll let you finish it off for the final layup. You can run out the clock. You can take the victory formation here.
Yeah, we'll run out the clock here on another episode of the Super Region Roundup. Thank you for joining us. For Gary, as well as myself, Colin here. Make sure you tune in next week for more expert scores, news, analysis, and more.